The tension in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. My stepfather, Mark, sat at the head of the table, his broad shoulders squared, his sharp eyes scanning over us like a hawk inspecting its prey. My mother sat beside him, picking at her food, her silence as predictable as ever. And across from me, Olivia, the golden child, smiled sweetly, her every movement graceful, every word perfectly timed to impress. She was the daughter he chose to love. I was the one he simply tolerated. The usual dinnertime routine played out. Mark boasting about Olivia's latest achievements, throwing in a passive-aggressive remark about how I should take notes from her. I endured it like I always did, chewing my food slowly, waiting for it to be over. But tonight was different. Because tonight I held the truth in my hands. And I was about to shatter his illusion. It started when Mark leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass before taking a slow sip. "So, Olivia," he said with a proud smile. "How's school? Any new awards I should clear space on the shelf for?" Olivia giggled, tucking her golden curls behind her ear. "Well, nothing official yet. But my professor said I might be nominated for the Young Writers Award next semester." Mark beamed. "That's fantastic. Emma. That's what dedication looks like." I clenched my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. It was always like this. Olivia was the standard, the perfect daughter, the flawless example of what I could never be. Meanwhile, I was the one Mark barely acknowledged unless it was to compare me to her. I had swallowed my pride too many times, let too many insults roll off my back. Not tonight. I set my fork down and leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "You should probably make room on that shelf for something else too." Mark barely spared me a glance. "And what exactly would that be?" I met Olivia's eyes across the table, watching as her smug smile faltered. He knew. He could feel it coming. I took a slow breath, savoring the moment before I dropped the bomb. "Well," I said, tilting my head, "maybe you should save space for the paternity test results once Olivia's baby is born." The sound of the wine glass slipping from Mark's fingers and shattering against the floor was almost satisfying. A stunned silence swallowed the room. Olivia's face drained of color. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Mark just sat there frozen, staring at me like he had misheard. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. I folded my arms. "Your perfect daughter has been sneaking out every weekend to meet a married man. And guess what? She's pregnant." A strangled gasp slipped from my mother's lips. Olivia shot up from her chair, her eyes wild with panic. "That's not true. Dad, she's lying." I didn't blink. "Am I?" Olivia's face twisted with desperation. "Dad, you know Emma. She hates me. She's just trying to ruin my reputation." Mark turned to her, his expression unreadable. His hands were clenched into fists on the table. "Is that true, Olivia?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. And right there, in that single second of hesitation, I won. As Mark saw it. For the first time ever, he saw the cracks in Olivia's perfect image. He saw the truth. I had been the disappointment for years. The failure. The one he never measured up. But tonight, Olivia was the disgrace. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one he looked at with disgust. Rewind 6 months and my life was a never-ending cycle of comparisons. Growing up in Mark's house felt like being trapped in a rigged competition. One where I was always set up to lose before I even had a chance to compete. From the moment my mother married him, he made it clear that I was not his priority. His heart, his attention, and his praise belonged to Olivia. She was his pride, his legacy. Me. I was just there. A reminder of my mother's past, a burden he had to tolerate for the sake of his marriage. I wasn't stupid. I saw the way he looked at me like I was some inconvenient obligation. It didn't help that Olivia fed into it. She relished in being his favorite. She played the role of the perfect daughter flawlessly, knowing that the more perfect she seemed, the more pathetic I looked in comparison. And she made sure I felt it every single day. "Olivia won an award at school today," Mark announced one evening, settling into his seat at the dining table. He looked at me pointedly as if expecting me to react a certain way. "First place in the statewide writing competition. Isn't that amazing, Emma?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral as I stabbed my fork into my overcooked broccoli. "Yeah, congrats," I muttered, not because I wasn't impressed, but because I knew where this conversation was going. It always went the same way. Mark sighed, shaking his head like my lack of enthusiasm personally offended him. And what about you? He asked. Anything worth mentioning? I hesitated. I had, in fact, done something worth mentioning. I had just finished a big chemistry project and received one of the highest grades in the class. It wasn't a statewide competition win, but it was still something I was proud of. I swallowed hard and said, I got a B+ on my chemistry test. Mark scoffed. A B+? Olivia never gets anything below an A. Across the table, Olivia smirked, twirling her perfect golden hair around her finger. It's okay, Emma, she said in that sickeningly sweet voice. Not everyone's meant for academic success. My hands clenched under the table. Mark nodded in agreement. Exactly. Some people just don't have the same drive Olivia has. And that's fine. But you should at least try to push yourself more. Push myself more. Like I wasn't already trying. Like I wasn't already exhausted from forcing myself to stay in a house where I never felt good enough. My mom, as usual, stayed quiet. She always did when Mark spoke to me like this. Maybe she thought keeping the peace was more important than defending me. Or maybe deep down she agreed with him. I lost my appetite. It wasn't just academics. It was everything. If I wore jeans and a t-shirt, Mark would comment on how Olivia always dressed so classy in her skirts and blouses. If I spent a Saturday at home reading, he would point out how Olivia spent hers at charity events or networking with influential people. If I brought home a new friend, Mark would compare them to Olivia's friends, who were all apparently well-mannered and came from good families. It was endless. And Olivia? He basked in it. She played the piano like a prodigy. She spoke fluent French. She got into every club, every honors society, every leadership position available at school. And Mark worshipped her for it. Olivia is going to be someone important one day, he once told me. You should take notes. I had wanted to scream. Because what he was really saying was, you are not important. You never will be. I could have lived with the comparisons. I had gotten used to them. But what I couldn't forgive was the way he let Olivia treat me. Mark spoiled her, bought her whatever she wanted, defended her when she was wrong, made excuses for her every mistake. But when it came to me, he was cold, dismissive, unforgiving. And Olivia took full advantage of it. One afternoon I was in the kitchen reaching for a glass of water when Olivia bumped into me on purpose, spilling juice all over my shirt. Oh my God, Emma, she gasped, covering her mouth in fake concern. I didn't see you there. I gritted my teeth, wiping at the stain. Are you serious? Mark walked in just as Olivia pouted. It was an accident, she said, eyes wide and innocent. I scoffed. No, it wasn't. Mark barely glanced at my ruined shirt before sighing. Emma, don't be dramatic. My fingers tightened around the glass in my hand. Dramatic? I turned to Olivia, who smirked at me behind his back. She knew she could get away with anything. And that was the moment I decided. I was done playing the silent, obedient stepdaughter. I had been compared, dismissed, and treated like less for too long. But I knew something Mark didn't. I knew Olivia's secret. And one day soon I was going to make sure he knew too. Secrets have a way of creeping out when you least expect them. And Olivia's? It fell right into my lap. It was almost poetic. After years of being compared to her, after enduring Mark's endless favoritism, I was the one who uncovered the one thing that would shatter her perfect image. And the best part? He had no idea I knew. It started on a random Saturday night. Mark and my mother had gone to a charity gala. Some event where they could parade Olivia around like a prized show horse. But Olivia didn't go. She had feigned a headache, saying she needed to stay home and rest. I knew better. She had been sneaking around for months. He thought no one noticed, but I did. The way she always glanced at her phone with a secretive smile. The way she would disappear for hours and come back looking too pleased with herself. The way she covered her tracks just enough to fool Mark, but not enough to fool me. That night I had been sitting in my room, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I heard it. Her voice, soft but urgent, right outside my door. I froze. He was on the phone. No, I can't tonight. My dad's getting suspicious. Oz. I don't care what she thinks, she never questions me anyway. I frowned. Who was she talking about? Ugh, I know, baby, Olivia whined. I miss you too. But we have to be careful. If your wife finds out. My breath hitched. Wife. I clamped a hand over my mouth, heart pounding. Olivia was having an affair, and not just any affair. She was seeing a married man. This was huge. I had always known she wasn't as perfect as she pretended to be, but this was bigger than I could have imagined. She giggled softly, her voice sickeningly sweet. You know I love you. And once the baby is here. I almost dropped my phone. Baby? He was pregnant? I felt a surge of emotions, shock, disbelief, and, if I was being honest, a twisted sense of satisfaction. Olivia, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one Mark worshipped, was hiding a scandal big enough to burn down the perfect world he had built around her. And I was the only one who knew. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with possibilities. Should I confront her? Should I tell Mark immediately? Or should I wait for the perfect moment? By morning I had made my decision. I needed proof. Mark would never believe me without solid evidence. Olivia was too good at twisting things in her favor. So I started watching her more closely. Every time she left the house I paid attention. I noted the times, the patterns. I accidentally walked into her room when she was texting, catching glimpses of messages she quickly hid. I listened at doors. And then one afternoon I got my break. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while making a smoothie. And on the screen was an email, one she hadn't logged out of. From Daniel Carter. Subject: baby names? Olivia, we need to talk about this. You know I love you, but we have to be smart. If my wife finds out, she'll take everything. We need a plan. I barely had time to process the words before Olivia turned around. I quickly grabbed a glass of water to make it look like I had just walked in. Hey, I said casually. She smiled, completely unaware. Hey. But in that moment I knew. I had everything I needed. For the next few days I carried the secret like a loaded gun in my pocket. I wasn't sure what I wanted more. To expose her immediately and watch her world crumble. Or to hold on to it, to let the tension build until I could ruin her at the perfect moment. But one thing was clear. The next time Mark tried to compare me to his perfect daughter, I was going to remind him that his perfect daughter wasn't so perfect after all. Keeping Olivia's secret felt like holding a grenade with the pin pulled. All I had to do was drop it and everything would explode. But I wasn't going to waste it on a petty argument. No, I wanted the moment to count. I wanted Mark to see her for what she truly was. I wanted the look on his face when his perfect daughter crumbled. So I waited. And when the perfect opportunity arrived, I didn't hesitate. It was supposed to be a family bonding night. Mark had insisted that we all have dinner together. Just the four of us. Something that hadn't happened in months. He said it was important, that we should make an effort to be more like a real family. Which was hilarious, considering I had never felt like part of this family. Still, I sat at the table picking at my food while Mark and Olivia chatted like best friends. You won't believe what happened at the club today, Olivia said, her voice dripping with importance. Mrs. Lancaster asked if I'd be interested in interning at her husband's firm over the summer. Mark beamed with pride. That's incredible, sweetheart. An opportunity like that could put you on the fast track to success. Olivia shrugged like it was no big deal, but I saw the smug smile tugging at her lips. And then, as expected, Mark turned to me. Emma, what about you? Have you given any thought to your future? Here we go. I swallowed my irritation. Yeah. I'm looking into scholarships for forensic science programs. Mark blinked, clearly unimpressed. Forensics? That's interesting. But you know, Olivia's internship could open doors that lead straight to high-level positions. Maybe you should think bigger. I clenched my jaw. Think bigger? I had spent years trying to measure up, but no matter what I did, Mark always found a way to make me feel smaller. And tonight I was done. I set my fork down carefully. You're right, Mark, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Maybe I should take some inspiration from Olivia. I mean, she's clearly got her future all planned out. Olivia shot me a warning look. Good. He knew. Mark, however, was oblivious. Exactly. Olivia is responsible, ambitious. I leaned forward. And pregnant. Silence. The kind that suffocates a room, thick and inescapable. Mark frowned. What did you just say? Olivia's face drained of color. I tilted my head. Oops. Was that supposed to be a secret? Mark turned to Olivia, his expression sharp. Is she lying? Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. That was all the confirmation he needed. His face twisted with disbelief. You're pregnant. Mom gasped, covering her mouth. Olivia, tell me she's lying. Olivia glared daggers at me, but I saw the panic in her eyes. Who's the father? Mark demanded. I smirked. Oh, that's the best part. It's Daniel Carter. You know, the one with a wife. Mark went pale. Mom gasped again. Olivia snapped. You nosy little. Mark slammed his fist on the table. Enough. We all flinched. His jaw clenched as he stared at Olivia like he was seeing her for the first time. Tell me this isn't true. Tears welled in her eyes, but it was too late. The truth was out. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointment anymore. Secrets don't just destroy reputations, they shatter illusions. And the illusion of Olivia's perfection had just gone up in flames. The silence at the dinner table stretched, thick with shock and betrayal. Mark's face was frozen in disbelief, his fork still clutched in his hand like he had forgotten how to move. My mother sat with wide, horrified eyes, her fingers trembling as they covered her mouth. And Olivia? He was panicking. I watched her struggle to form words, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps as reality crashed down on her. She had always been Mark's perfect daughter. His pride and joy. No. Now she was the girl who got pregnant by a married man. Mark finally found his voice, and when he spoke his tone was lethal. Is this true, Olivia? She opened her mouth, shaking her head like she could will the truth away. Dad, answer the damn question, he roared, slamming his fist on the table so hard that the plates rattled. I had never seen him lose his temper like that. Not with her. Never with her. Tears slipped down Olivia's face, her hands shaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. Mark scoffed, his eyes cold and furious. You didn't mean to get pregnant? You didn't mean to destroy a marriage. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. How long has this been going on? Olivia was full-on sobbing now, her perfect mask completely destroyed. A few months, she admitted weakly. Mark's whole body went stiff. And you never thought to tell me? He sniffled. I was going to. When? Mark exploded. After his wife finds out. After the scandal hits the papers. I sat back in my chair watching the empire she built crumble around her. She had been Mark's favorite for years, and now in the span of 5 minutes, I had dismantled everything. Mark turned to my mother, his face tight with fury. Did you know about this? Mom looked genuinely shocked. No. Of course not. She turned to Olivia, pleading. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell me? Olivia snapped. Because I knew you'd react like this. Her voice cracked. I knew you'd be ashamed of me. Mark let out a harsh breath, his hands shaking as he dragged them through his hair. You think shame is the problem here? Olivia, do you have any idea what you've done? The Carter family is one of my biggest clients. If this gets out, it could ruin my career. But it wasn't just about her reputation. It was about his reputation. Olivia flinched. I didn't mean to mess things up for you. Mark shook his head, disgust written all over his face. This is bigger than just me. You've ruined your own future. Do you know how hard it is to bounce back from something like this? And just like that, Olivia's tears turned to rage. Oh, but when I was perfect, it was all about how proud you were of me, right? She wiped her tears angrily. Now that I've screwed up, suddenly I'm nothing? Mark's nostrils flared. You lied to me. You pretended to be someone you're not. She let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you mean like Emma? Because she's never had the chance to be anything but your disappointment, right? Mark stiffened. Mom sucked in a breath. And Olivia realized, too late, that she had just made a huge mistake. Because now the attention was on me. Slowly Mark turned to me. For the first time in years he actually looked at me, not with irritation, not with condescension, but with realization. I met his gaze evenly. I wanted him to see it. See me. All those years he had brushed me aside. All those times he had compared me to Olivia. Every moment he had made me feel like I would never be enough. No. Now he knew. I was never the problem. The golden child had fallen and the so-called disappointment was still standing. Mark swallowed hard, like he was trying to piece together the truth he had ignored for so long. His lips parted slightly as if he was going to say something that had been left unsaid for far too long. But Olivia wasn't done. She turned to me, her face twisted in desperation and fury. You did this, she shrieked. You've always been jealous of me. I arched a brow. Jealous? Olivia. I just got tired of you getting away with everything. She let out a harsh laugh, shaking her head. You think this makes you better than me? I shrugged. I don't have to be better than you, Olivia. I just had to tell the truth. Her face turned red with rage. You ruined my life. I tilted my head. You did that all by yourself. Mark exhaled sharply and rubbed his temples. Enough. His voice was quieter this time, but it was definitive. Olivia shut her mouth immediately. Mark turned to me again, and for the first time in forever, there was no disappointment in his gaze. No resentment. Just a guilt. And maybe a hint of regret. I stood, feeling the weight of my years of silent suffering lift. I'm done with dinner, I said, pushing my chair back. Thanks for the meal. And with that I walked away, leaving Olivia to sit in the ruins of her own lies. The moment I walked away from that dinner table, the power dynamic in our family shifted forever. For years I had been the outsider, the one Mark barely tolerated while he worshipped the ground Olivia walked on. But now his perfect daughter was the one who had disappointed him. Me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the problem anymore. I went to my room, closed the door, and waited. I expected yelling, screaming, maybe even Mark storming in, demanding to know how I found out about Olivia's pregnancy. But there was only silence. For the first time in a long time, Mark didn't have anything to say. That silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It stretched through the walls, suffocating the house. No fake laughter. No Olivia charming her way out of trouble. No Mark acting like his daughter was too perfect to ever make a mistake. Just cold, hard reality. And it felt so damn good. I should have known Olivia wouldn't take this lying down. I heard her storming down the hall an hour later, heels clicking aggressively against the wooden floors. The door to my room burst open before I even had a chance to brace myself. She stood there, furious, eyes swollen from crying, her makeup smudged. Are you happy now? She spat, stepping into my room like she owned the place. You finally got what you wanted. I leaned against my desk, arms crossed. And what exactly do you think I wanted? She threw her hands up. To ruin my life. I laughed, shaking my head. Olivia, I didn't ruin your life. You did that all by yourself. Her jaw clenched. You had no right to expose me like that. I tilted my head. And you had no right to treat me like trash for years just because Mark preferred you. I pushed off the desk, stepping closer. Maybe if you had spent less time trying to be perfect and more time being decent, I wouldn't have had so much fun watching your world fall apart. Her face twisted with rage. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think this changes anything? I smirked. It already has. Her nostrils flared. You're pathetic. I shrugged. And you're pregnant by a married man. So tell me, who's pathetic now? She raised her hand like she was about to slap me, but I didn't flinch. Go ahead, I said calmly. Hit me. Just know that you'll be proving me right about everything. She froze. Her hand trembled in the air, fingers curling into a fist before she let it drop to her side. Her lip quivered, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry again. But then she spun on her heel and stormed out of my room, slamming the door behind her. She was unraveling. And I was loving every second of it. Something changed in the house after that night. Mark stopped comparing me to Olivia. Stopped treating me like a failure. Mom stopped tiptoeing around conflict, finally standing up for herself instead of playing peacekeeper. And Olivia? She stopped acting like a queen and started realizing she was just as flawed as the rest of us. But the biggest change? Me. For years I had been trapped in this toxic cycle. Constantly trying to prove myself, constantly feeling like I'd never be enough. No, I didn't care anymore. I was free. Free from their expectations. Free from Mark's endless disapproval. Free from Olivia's shadow. I had my own life to live. And for the first time in years I felt unstoppable. I wasn't the disappointment anymore. And I never would be again.